Buying a computer in 2022 is, at the moment, not the most fun experience. Desktop parts, specifically GPUs, are incredibly expensive due to lack of supply and a lot of demand, and all laptops are at a higher price too, though they are coming down. So if you've got between £700 and £800 to spend, is the Acer Nitro 5 Ryzen Edition worth buying, or should you look at something else? Hey guys, I'm Ryan Thomas and this is my review of the Acer Nitro 5 in 2022. Let me first start off by specifying the version that I'm reviewing. This is the 15-inch AMD Ryzen 5600H model with 8GB of RAM, a 500GB M.2 SSD and the RTX 3060 GPU. So this is one of the lower end devices in its family, hence the £700 price tag. On the surface, this is actually a really good deal because along with those specs, you're getting a 144Hz IPS 1080p display, a decent keyboard and trackpad, and plenty of I/O, all wrapped up in a decidedly gamery but not over the top body. The design is subtle-ish, you get those red accents and sort of the angular design to it, but it's not all guns blazing with RGB everywhere and everywhere seems to have an accent. This is actually quite nicely balanced between sort of professional and gamer. There are lots of vents on the bottom, rear and at the sides to aid with the ventilation and cooling. The two fans and chunky heat sinks move a lot of heat away from the system, even if the CPU and GPU run hot whilst gaming. Yeah, this isn't the best cooled laptop in its class. It's not huge, it's not got tons of heatsink, but I do feel like it cools itself relatively well for what it is. That said, it does get pretty loud even with the temps as high as they are. Getting it in and out of laptop bags, I have just a standard laptop backpack and it gets in there very easily. The only thing I will mention when it comes to this is that there are sharp edges, not sharp enough to cut you, but sharp enough to sort of get caught and snag on bits of fabric if you aren't careful enough. The bezels around the screen are thin-ish on the sides, but there's still some thickness around the top and the bottom. I don't mind this, but it stops the Nitro 5 from looking hyper premium, if you will. The keyboard is pretty decent to type on, certainly feels nicer than the 16-inch and 15-inch Touch Bar generation MacBook Pros, though saying that I'm not a fan of the pudding style keycaps with the translucent walls. They look a little cheap, especially on the arrow keys. The RGB is actually in zones and not per key, meaning that you can't control the individual brightness and colour of each key's lighting. This may be a deal breaker for those of you who are really into customization, however I found the 4 zones to be pretty sort of colour accurate and consistent across the board. It's definitely not the most consistent, but it's consistent enough and I tend to leave it on white anyway. This is all configurable within Acer's software package. It's pretty easy to find your way around things, I found it quite intuitive, and of course it's free with the laptop. I found the trackpad to be a bit hit or miss, so I actually do prefer the separate buttons for left clicking and right clicking. It's one of those trackpads that has the integrated left click and right click, which means that sometimes when you click, there are sort of phantom clicks here and there. It's not awful and Ace has done a pretty good job in software of mitigating these issues. However, it does happen every now and then, and I would recommend using a dedicated mouse with this thing if you're going to be gaming. That's what I did. I used a Logitech wireless gaming mouse and it made the experience way nicer. And to be honest, with the peripheral setup, you're probably likely to be using external peripherals if you're going to be gaming at a desk setup. So I tend to use this with a wired keyboard, a wireless mouse, and a bigger external monitor. Some of you might not be doing these things, and for this maybe you might prefer a better laptop that has better integrated peripherals. However, I found that even if I'm just using an external mouse and then using the inbuilt keyboard and the inbuilt screen, it was a good enough experience. And if you're having a good experience watching this video, please do drop a sub. I'm sorry I'm doing this, guys, it just helps with the channel out. It really does help me out as well personally. And if you love the content as well, give it a like. Thank you. The Nitro 5 has an excellent array of ports and connectors. We've got 3 USB-A ports, a Type-C, a Gigabit Ethernet, DC in, headphone microphone combo jack, and HDMI. This is more than enough to connect it to all the peripherals that I wanted to connect it to, and especially that Gigabit Ethernet port is really nice to have. That's not to say that the Wi-Fi is bad in this thing. I found the performance to be fantastic, although Bluetooth didn't quite work for me, so I'm not sure if that's just a driver issue because it definitely has the hardware inside it. But Wi-Fi was absolutely class. I want to talk about the integrated display because it is pretty good, but it's definitely not the best. So IPS can suffer with issues such as blooming, which is where the contrast ratio isn't very high due to the way the backlight works, and you end up with sort of a slightly washed out image. Now, it doesn't look too bad on this model, and other monitors can definitely be worse. However, it's something to watch out for compared to the LCD based panels. LCD based panels also tend to be a lot quicker. I never found an issue with speed when it comes to input latency with this thing. However, I did find that compared to my BenQ XL2546K, which is kind of the GOAT at this point, there was a lot of sort of motion blur to it, and that's due to the fact that it is using the IPS panel, meaning that the inter-frame switching isn't quite as quick as you'd want. Now, is this going to matter for the majority of gamers? Absolutely not, but when you've got a monitor as good as that, you're going to feel the difference when you step down to a lower end display. Now, it being 144Hz means that it's great for esports gamers who don't have better displays out there. So it's great for playing CSGO, which is my main game, Valorant as well, and Rocket League and other games like that. And also 144Hz is nice to have even when playing casual games like Minecraft, for example. And it's very much appreciated at this price point at 1080p, because at 15 inches, 1080p is about as sharp as you really need. Unless you're going to be doing loads of productivity on here, or you've got really good eyesight, you're not going to tell a massive difference. Sure, I can tell the difference between it and the Quad HD display in my MacBook Pro, but I really would rather go with the 144Hz, the quicker display in the laptop, compared to the higher resolution but lower refresh rate model in the MacBook for gaming at least. Pivoting here because I wasn't sure of a segue, I want to talk about the upgradability of this thing because I recently did an upgrade to it. Now, this review has been made on the fact that it's got 8GB of RAM. However, recently after writing this review, I've kind of edited a bit in where I've upgraded to 32GB of RAM, mainly for modded Minecraft and for Rust. And the experience of taking it apart is great. Now, I'm a computer technician, that is my job. I take apart and put together laptops constantly throughout the day. But this was a breath of fresh air. A lot of modern laptops have sort of rubber that you have to peel away that never quite goes on back right the way you wanted it, to get screws underneath, and there are lots of things that you have to change just to get to screws, and when you get to the screws they're really dodgy shapes that you need a particular kind of screwdriver for. Not with the Nitro 5. It was very easy, just a standard Phillips screwdriver, very easy to get apart. The plastic comes away really easily, of course under several screws, so it's not going to fall off. And when you get in there, you've got access to 2 RAM slots, 2 M.2 slots, and a 2.5 inch hard drive bay. You can put a hard drive, mechanical drive, or an SSD in here, and you will need to get a separate cable to put the SSD in there. These are available online. But for the M.2 slots, you've got 2 there. One of them is occupied by the 500GB drive that comes with it. You can of course swap this out or add extra storage if you don't want to reinstall Windows, and then from there you can also add additional storage with the 2.5 inch slot, so you get lots of expandability when it comes to storage. And obviously, I put 32GB of RAM. I believe this does accept 64GB if you really wanted to, so that is a possibility. I will correct myself on screen if I'm wrong there, because just trying to work out if that was possible with this machine, but 32 is definitely possible and it works really, really well. With the charger plugged in for maximum power, because you will notice when you disconnect the charger that it won't run at full speed, the performance is really good, even from more demanding titles like ACC and Cyberpunk. For esports fans, you're easily getting your 150 frames depending on which settings you use, and I found that actually the performance in higher end games and lower end games was better than I expected. Now, the laptop did get very warm with the CPU topping out around 90 C and the GPU around 65. The fans got very loud, though if you wear headphones you won't really need to worry about this. But it is worth mentioning that even though it's a slightly thicker laptop than, let's say, a MacBook, and it does have all that cooling potential, it can get and does get very hot. Now, I use it on a raised laptop stand, which is something that I got off the internet. I use it on my MacBook as well. It doesn't have any fans underneath it. It literally just lifts it up and creates airflow, or creates an area for air underneath the laptop, and this is definitely recommended. If you're using this thing in bed or on your lap, you're going to be covering those vents and it's going to be a bad time. Not to reuse the overdone South Park meme, but it really is going to be a bad time. Make sure that it's sat on a nice flat surface, something like a wood table for example, and if possible get it raised a little bit and that will give you the better experience. And it'll also increase your frames because the GPU and CPU won't have to thermal throttle down. Battery life is a bit of a sore subject when it comes to the Nitro 5. For the 58 watt hour battery, you are not getting a great battery life, especially when you consider the fact you've got a really good CPU and a really good GPU in there, you've got the integrated 144Hz display, and you've probably got the keyboard lit up as well. It's not going to last very long on a battery, and it didn't for me. Now, this isn't an issue, say if you're using this for sort of work when you're out and about, but play when you've got it plugged in, because that works just fine. However, if you're likely to be gaming out on the go without some sort of wall socket near you, I wouldn't recommend this laptop because the battery life just isn't that good. I do think that that's mainly due to the fact the battery is fairly small. I mean, you probably couldn't have fit more battery in here. You maybe could have if you got rid of the 2.5-inch drive bay, but you know, the upgradability is nice to have. So for reference, my MacBook is a 99 watt hour battery, which is quite a lot bigger than the 58 in the Nitro 5, and it lasts way longer. And other gaming laptops sort of have sort of 70 watt hour batteries, which are, it's still not as big as the MacBook, but significantly bigger than the one in the Nitro 5. So yeah, if you're after great battery life, maybe leave this one out. Which brings us to the conclusion. For £600 to £700, with prices likely to drop when newer laptops come out, is it worth buying the Acer Nitro 5? And I definitely think it is. There are some options from Dell and from Asus that are fairly good, but I like the combination of things from the Nitro 5. So I very much like the design. The screen is pretty good. The performance is fantastic. It's not the best, you know, you could get a better desktop for less and all this stuff, but I think as a whole it's a good laptop. I like the typing experience, I like the gaming experience, and I like the fact that it's not over the top in its gaming aesthetic. Combine this with stellar upgradability, and you've got something that is, you know, a bit like an old ThinkPad in a way. It's very versatile, it's very usable, and though it's not quite as sturdy as an old ThinkPad, I do like to think of it in that way. So there you have it guys, that's my review of the Acer Nitro 5 laptop. Please do leave a like and a comment letting me know what you think of the laptop content on this channel. I'm probably not going to do many of these, but it's just something I wanted to put out because I hadn't really tackled a gaming laptop before. I've never had one before owning this one, so I thought it was quite interesting. Do check out all the links in the video description, really does help me out, and also, you know, find my social media, and I'm quite active on Twitter at the moment. And I thank you all so much for watching. I want to give a massive shout out to my patrons for being continually supportive. Thank you very much guys. I've been Ryan Thomas, and I'll catch you later. Peace.